It was one of those evenings when the sky looked heavy, like it might rain but never really did. The city was slowing down after a long day. Shops were closing, buses were full, and people were rushing to get home. In the middle of all that noise and movement was a young man named Ethan, walking down the same street he always took after work. He worked at a small bookstore tucked between a cafe and a flower shop. It wasn't the kind of place that made much money, but he liked the quiet there, the smell of old pages and the sound of people flipping through books. His job was simple: help customers keep the shelves neat and close up before it got dark. Nothing exciting ever really happened there. Ethan's life wasn't perfect, but he was used to it.
He lived alone in a small rented apartment.
Every morning he woke up to the same alarm, ate the same breakfast, and caught the same bus to work. He didn't complain, but he didn't feel inspired either. It was as if each day was just a repeat of the last. The only thing that gave him some peace was watching people. On his walk home, he often noticed the small details others ignored. The man who fed pigeons every evening, the old couple who always held hands, the kid selling flowers at the traffic light. Maybe it was because he didn't have much going on in his own life, but he found comfort in watching these tiny pieces of other people's worlds. That evening, as he waited for the light to turn green, he saw something that made him pause. Across the street stood an old woman. She looked frail, her back slightly bent, both hands gripping two heavy shopping bags. The crowd moved around her like she was invisible. The light changed and cars started honking as people hurried across. But she didn't move. Ethan could see her mouth forming words, maybe counting seconds, maybe whispering to herself. Her eyes darted left and right, unsure when it would be safe to cross. Everyone around him seemed too busy to notice. Some even gave her annoyed looks for standing in the way. For a moment, Ethan thought about continuing his walk. He had groceries to buy, dinner to cook, and a long day behind him. But something about her, maybe the way her hands trembled, made him stop. Without really thinking, he stepped off the curb and walked toward her. "Ma'am, would you like some help crossing?" he asked softly. The old woman looked up, her face lined with years but her eyes kind and clear. "Oh dear," she said, almost whispering. "I didn't want to trouble anyone. These cars move so fast now." "It's no trouble," he said with a small smile. "Let's go together." He offered his arm and she took it gently. They waited for the light to turn green again. As they crossed, the traffic noise faded behind them, replaced by the steady rhythm of their steps. She held on tightly, her grip surprisingly strong for someone her age. When they reached the other side, she let out a soft sigh. "Thank you, young man," she said. "People don't stop much these days. Everyone's in such a hurry." Ethan smiled, adjusting his bag. "It's all right. I wasn't in a rush." She looked at him for a moment longer than expected, as if trying to remember his face. "You have kind eyes," she said. "Kindness shows there first." "You know?" He didn't know what to say, so he just nodded, feeling a little awkward but strangely touched. The old woman reached into her bag and pulled out a small wrapped candy. "Here," she said. "It's not much, but I always carry sweets with me. You never know when you'll meet someone who deserves one." He laughed softly and took it, thanking her. She gave him a warm smile, then turned and continued down the sidewalk, walking slowly until she disappeared around the corner. Ethan didn't think much more about it. It was just a small moment of kindness, something anyone might do. Still, as he walked home, he couldn't stop replaying the woman's words in his head. Kind eyes. It wasn't something people said anymore. When he reached home, he tossed the candy on his table, made himself a simple dinner, and turned on the TV. But even with the noise from the news, his mind kept wandering back to her. There was something different about that moment, something quiet but meaningful. The next morning, the sky was gray again. He opened the store as usual, swept the front step, arranged a few new arrivals on the shelf. Around mid-morning, the bell over the door jingled, but no one entered. Instead, when he looked up, he saw a small envelope lying on the counter. His name, Ethan, was written on it in shaky handwriting. He frowned. None of his co-workers had handwriting like that. He picked it up, turned it over, and noticed that it wasn't sealed. Inside was a short letter written in neat cursive. It said, "To the young man who stopped for me when no one else did, thank you. You reminded me that kindness still lives in this world. I wanted to leave you something small, something that once gave me hope. It might not seem like much now, but one day, you'll understand why I kept it all these years." With warm wishes, Agnes folded with the letter was a small, old-fashioned key. Ethan stared at it for a long time, unsure what to think. He didn't remember telling the woman his name. Maybe she heard it at the bookstore? But how would she know where he worked? The thought made him uneasy for a moment, but curiosity quickly took over. The key was tiny, the kind you'd use for a jewelry box or an old drawer. It looked antique, the metal slightly worn and cold to the touch. There was no explanation, no address, nothing else inside the envelope. He asked his manager if anyone had come by earlier that morning, but no one had. The letter must have been dropped off before the store opened. All day, Ethan found himself distracted. Every time he looked at the key, a part of him wondered, what could it open?
Why give it to him?
Maybe it was just symbolic, a way of saying thank you. Still, something about it didn't feel random. It felt intentional, personal. That night, he placed the letter on his desk beside the candy she'd given him. He didn't know why, but he couldn't bring himself to throw either of them away. There was a warmth in those small things, a quiet reminder that life still had surprises left, even in the middle of ordinary days. Over the next few days, he couldn't stop thinking about her. Each time he crossed the same street, he half expected to see her again, standing there with her shopping bags waiting for the light. But she never came back. One evening, as he was locking up the store, a light drizzle began to fall. He pulled his jacket tighter and started walking home. The traffic lights glowed against the wet pavement, reflections dancing in puddles. And again he thought of her, how calm she had been, how she'd smiled even when the world rushed past her. He wondered what her story was. Maybe she lived alone. Maybe she didn't have family nearby. Maybe that's why his small act of help had meant something to her. He realized how little it had taken, a few minutes, a few words, to make a difference in someone's day. When he reached his apartment, he found himself staring at the envelope again. The key glinted faintly under the lamp. Without really meaning to, he whispered her name. Agnes. It was strange how a single meeting could stay with him like that. Just one moment, one crossing, and suddenly he felt like he'd stepped into something bigger than he understood. That night, as he drifted off to sleep, he dreamed of the street again. But this time, when he helped her cross, she didn't let go of his arm at the other side. She just smiled and said, "Keep walking." When he woke up, the dream still clung to him. The letter, the key, her face, it all felt like a sign, though he couldn't say of what. He didn't know yet that this simple act of kindness was about to change everything he thought he knew about fate, timing, and the power of a small good deed. He didn't know that the key on his desk would soon unlock more than just a box. It would unlock a story that connected his life to hers in a way neither of them could have planned. For now, he just stared at the key, feeling something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Ethan couldn't stop thinking about the letter. Every time he glanced at the key lying on his desk, it filled him with a quiet kind of curiosity. It wasn't just an object anymore, it was a question. Who was Agnes, really? And why him? For the next few days he carried the key in his pocket. He didn't know why, but it felt wrong to leave it behind. It was small and light, but somehow it seemed to hold weight, like a secret waiting to be told. At the bookstore, his co-workers noticed that he was quieter than usual. When customers came in, he smiled politely, but his mind was somewhere else. Even when he restocked shelves or made coffee for himself, he found his hand reaching for the key inside his pocket, rubbing the smooth metal as if it could somehow answer the questions in his head. One evening, as he was closing the store, the rain started again, soft and steady, the kind that turns the streets into silver mirrors. He locked the door, pulled his hood up, and began walking home. When he reached the same crosswalk where he had first met the old woman, he stopped. The memory felt so clear, as if it had happened just moments ago. The way she had smiled, the way her voice trembled slightly when she spoke. He looked around. People hurried past him with umbrellas and shopping bags just as they had that night. But she wasn't there. She never would be again. Something inside him told him that. That night after dinner, Ethan sat at his desk again with the letter. He read it for what must have been the 10th time, tracing each word slowly. It might not seem like much now, but one day you'll understand why I kept it all these years. He whispered the line to himself and looked at the key again. "Kept what?" he said softly. "What does it open?" He flipped the envelope over again and again, hoping he might have missed something. A number, an address, a name of a place. But there was nothing. Just his name written neatly by a shaky hand. The next day on his lunch break, he decided to do something about it. He didn't like mysteries hanging over him, so he started small. He went to the cafe next door where some of the older locals often gathered in the morning. Maybe someone had seen her before. "Excuse me," he said to the woman behind the counter holding up the envelope. "Have you ever seen this handwriting before? Or do you know anyone named Agnes who lives around here?" The barista looked at it for a moment, then shook her head. "Can't say I do, but you might want to ask across the street. There's a man who's been running that tailor shop for 30 years. He knows everyone in this area." Ethan thanked her and crossed the road. Inside the tailor's shop, the air smelled faintly of fabric and old wood. Behind the counter sat a man with silver hair and glasses, threading a needle. "Good afternoon," Ethan said politely. "I'm looking for someone who might have lived nearby. Her name was Agnes." The man looked up, his eyebrows lifting slightly. "Agnes?" he repeated. "Do you mean Agnes Miller?" "I think so," Ethan said. "She was elderly, used a cane, and she passed away recently." The man nodded slowly, setting his work aside. "Yes, I remember her. Sweet lady. Lived 2 blocks over in that little blue house near the park. Used to come here years ago to get her dresses mended. Haven't seen her much lately, though. Why do you ask?" Ethan hesitated, then pulled the small key from his pocket and placed it on the counter. "She gave me this, or, well, she left it for me. I helped her cross the street once, and the next day this showed up with a letter." The man stared at the key for a moment, then smiled faintly. "That sounds like her, all right." "Always believed in small acts meaning big things. She'd tell me stories like that all the time." "Do you know what this key could be for?" Ethan asked. The tailor shook his head. "No, but her nephew might. He came by a few days ago after she passed. I think he's handling her things. Poor woman didn't have much family left." He wrote down an address on a small piece of paper and handed it to Ethan. "Try this. It's her lawyer's office. Maybe he can tell you more." Ethan thanked him and left, the note clutched tightly in his hand. He didn't know what he was expecting, but a strange sense of anticipation followed him the whole way home. It was like he was being pulled toward something that had been waiting for him long before he knew it existed. The next morning, after finishing his shift early, he went to the address. The office was small and quiet, tucked between 2 tall buildings. The nameplate by the door read, "James Whitfield, attorney at law." Inside, a middle-aged man with a calm smile looked up from behind his desk. "You must be Ethan," he said before Ethan could even introduce himself. Ethan blinked in surprise. "How do you know my name?" The man smiled softly. "Because she told me you might come. She mentioned you before she passed." "Please sit." Ethan sat down, his heart beating faster. "She mentioned me? But I only met her once," Mr. Whitfield nodded. "That one time meant more to her than you could imagine. She spoke about you in her final days, said that a young man with kind eyes had stopped to help her when no one else would." Ethan swallowed hard, unsure what to say. The lawyer opened a small file drawer and took out a folder. Inside was another envelope, larger this time, sealed carefully. "She asked me to give you this if you ever came asking about her. And if you brought the key." Ethan hesitated, then placed the key on the desk. The lawyer nodded and slid the envelope toward him. "I can't tell you what's inside, but I can tell you this, it's not about money or property. It's about something she wanted to pass on." Ethan thanked him and left, clutching the envelope tightly against his chest. Outside, the world looked different. The clouds had finally cleared and sunlight broke through, falling on the wet pavement. He walked until he found a bench in the small park nearby and sat down. His hands trembled slightly as he opened the envelope. Inside was a single piece of paper and a faded photograph. The paper had only a short message written in the same handwriting as before. "If you're reading this, it means you cared enough to look. The key belongs to something I left behind, a part of my life I couldn't close alone. You'll find it at Rosewood Bank, Box 319. It's yours now, and so is the story behind it." The photograph showed a younger version of Agnes, standing beside a smiling boy who looked to be about Ethan's age. They were standing in front of a bookstore, the same bookstore where Ethan worked now. He stared at the photo, stunned. It didn't make sense. The store had changed owners several times over the years, but the background was unmistakable. The same window display, the same corner, the same sign. He turned the photo over. On the back, in small, neat handwriting, were 4 words. For my son, always. Ethan sat in silence, the sound of distant traffic filling the air. The woman he had helped wasn't just a random stranger. She had some kind of connection to his world, to the bookstore, to that corner, maybe even to him in ways he didn't yet understand. He looked at the key again, realizing that it wasn't just an old trinket. It was a piece of her story, and somehow fate had chosen him to find it. That night, back in his apartment, Ethan placed the letter, the photo, and the key together on his desk. The 3 small items sat side by side, glowing softly in the lamplight. He whispered her name again, almost like a prayer. Agnes. He didn't know what waited for him at Rosewood Bank. He didn't know what was inside that box, or why she had trusted him with it. But for the first time in a long time, his life didn't feel ordinary anymore. It felt like the beginning of something. The next morning, Ethan woke up earlier than usual. The world outside was still quiet, the kind of silence that feels heavy, as if everything is waiting for something to begin. He sat at his small kitchen table with a cup of coffee, staring at the letter, the photo, and the old key spread out before him. Rosewood Bank. Box 319. He had read those words over and over last night, and even in his sleep they echoed in his mind. Part of him was nervous. He didn't know what he was walking into. Another part of him felt an odd excitement, like he was about to open a door that had been waiting for him all along. He got dressed, slipped the key into his pocket, and left for the bank. The morning air was cool and fresh, and the streets were still waking up. As he walked, memories of the old woman flashed in his mind. Her gentle voice, her wrinkled hands, her kind eyes. It felt unreal that someone he'd only met once had left him something so mysterious. When he reached Rosewood Bank, it looked exactly like the kind of place that would hold secrets. The building was old, made of stone, with high windows and quiet halls. The moment he stepped inside, the air felt different, colder, stiller. A woman at the front desk greeted him politely. "Good morning. How can I help you?" Ethan held up the key. "I think this belongs to one of your safety deposit boxes. Box number 319. The woman typed something on her computer and looked up. "Do you have identification?" He nodded and handed her his ID. She compared it to something on the screen and then smiled slightly. "Ah, yes. Miss Agnes Miller made arrangements for this box. You're listed as an authorized recipient." Ethan blinked in surprise. "She actually wrote my name down." "Yes, she did," the woman said kindly. "Please follow me." They walked down a long hallway lined with metal doors. The sound of their footsteps echoed off the walls. She stopped in front of a small door marked 319, then turned the lock and stepped aside. "You can take as much time as you need," she said, and left him alone. Ethan stood there for a moment, staring at the box. His heart was racing. He slid the key into the lock, turned it slowly, and heard the soft click as it opened. Inside was a small wooden box wrapped in a faded piece of cloth. He lifted it out carefully and set it on the small table nearby. The box was old, carved with small designs and initials. AM. The wood smelled faintly of lavender and dust. He hesitated before opening it. For a second he thought about how strange it was, standing in a bank vault holding something left to him by a woman he had met for only a few minutes. Then he slowly lifted the lid. Inside were letters, dozens of them neatly tied with a ribbon. Beside them was a small notebook, the cover worn from years of use. He untied the ribbon and opened the first letter. The handwriting was the same as before. The words were addressed to someone named Daniel. "My dearest Daniel, I don't know if I'll ever be brave enough to send these letters. Every day without you feels longer than the last. I still go by the bookstore sometimes just to feel closer to the place you loved. The boy who works there now reminds me of you sometimes. The way he looks around, the way he listens. Maybe that's just a mother's heart seeing what she wants to see." Ethan's throat tightened. He glanced at the photograph again, the young boy beside Agnes in front of the bookstore. That must have been Daniel, her son. He read the next few letters, each one filled with stories of her life. The grief of losing her only child, the loneliness that followed, the small joys that kept her going. She wrote about sitting by the park, watching people pass by, wondering if kindness still existed in the world. And then he reached a page that stopped him completely. To whoever finds this, if you're holding this letter, it means I'm gone. I want you to know that your act of kindness gave me something I thought I had lost forever. Hope. You reminded me of my son, and because of that, I can finally let go. The world needs more people like you. Maybe these letters will help you understand what kindness can heal, not just in others, but in yourself. Ethan sat there, his hands trembling slightly as he held the papers. He could feel the weight of her words sink deep into him. It wasn't just about helping someone cross the street anymore. It was about connection, the kind that happens once in a lifetime, the kind that changes people quietly and forever. He opened the small notebook next. It was filled with sketches, pencil drawings of city streets, faces of strangers, and notes written in the margins. One sketch made him freeze. It was of him, or someone who looked exactly like him, helping Agnes cross the street. He stared at it, speechless. She must have drawn it after that day, remembering the moment. The lines were gentle, full of warmth. Beneath it, she had written one sentence: "Kindness comes back when you least expect it." Ethan didn't realize tears had started forming in his eyes until one dropped onto the page. He wiped it away quickly, feeling both grateful and heartbroken at the same time. He packed the letters and the notebook carefully back into the box and left the vault. As he walked out of the bank, the woman at the counter smiled softly. "Did you find what you were looking for?" Ethan nodded slowly. "More than I expected." That evening, he sat in his apartment surrounded by the letters. He read each one carefully, feeling like he was stepping into someone else's life. He learned that Agnes had once been an artist, that she had painted murals around the city when she was young, that she had lost her husband early and raised Daniel alone. Daniel had worked at the same bookstore where Ethan now worked. One day, while helping a customer carry books to her car, there had been an accident. Agnes had written about it in one of her letters, how that single moment took away the person she loved most. After that, she stopped painting. She sold her brushes and moved into a small house near the park. Years passed quietly until the day she met Ethan, the boy who reminded her of her son. He put the letters down, leaning back in his chair. Everything made sense now. The look in her eyes, the way she had said kind eyes. It wasn't just a compliment. It was recognition. She saw something familiar, something that brought her peace. But one thing still bothered him. In the notebook's final page, there was a line that read, "For the one who carries this story forward, find the light I left behind." It wasn't clear what she meant. He looked through the box again, but there was nothing else inside. Just letters, drawings, and the small wooden box itself. He turned the box over in his hands and for the first time noticed a small carved flower on the bottom. A rose. It looked like a signature, but also like a hint. He thought of the park nearby, the one filled with rose bushes where she used to sit. Maybe that was what she meant. He couldn't explain why, but he felt like he needed to go there, so the next morning he did. The park was quiet, the air cool and fresh. Dew sparkled on the grass. He walked past the benches until he found one near the rose garden. The flowers were in full bloom, the scent filling the air. He sat down and closed his eyes. For a moment, it felt as if she was sitting right beside him. Calm, smiling, peaceful, he whispered softly. "I found it. Agnes, I found what you left." And in that silence, surrounded by the scent of roses, he realized what she had truly given him wasn't just a box or a key. It was purpose. A reminder that even one small act of kindness could travel across time, touching lives in ways he'd never imagine. The struggle he felt now wasn't about solving a mystery anymore. It was about what to do with it. How to honor her story, how to carry it forward. That was the question that lingered in his heart as he walked home under the soft morning sun. He didn't know it yet, but the answer would soon come to him, in the most unexpected way. Ethan couldn't sleep that night. The letters were still spread across his table, each one filled with pieces of a life he now felt strangely part of. Every word, every drawing carried a kind of quiet emotion that stayed with him. He kept reading them again and again, hoping to find meaning in every small detail. The next morning, he returned to work. The bookstore felt different now. Every corner, every shelf seemed to hold echoes of Agnes's memories. He wondered if her son had once stood behind the same counter, carried the same boxes, or arranged books just like he did. The thought made him feel both comforted and heavy-hearted at the same time. Around noon, a soft drizzle started outside. A few customers wandered in, mostly to escape the rain. Ethan smiled politely, but his mind was far away. Between helping customers, he found himself glancing at the window, the same one that had appeared in the photo of Agnes and her son. When the last customer left, Ethan walked to that very spot. He looked out onto the street, watching the cars pass and the raindrops roll down the glass. Then, without really planning to, he took the old photograph out of his pocket and held it against the window, aligning it with the street outside. It matched perfectly. The same streetlight, the same crosswalk, the same world, just many years apart. He stood there for a long moment staring at the photo until something caught his eye. There, across the street, right beside the same corner where he'd first met Agnes, was an art gallery, one he'd never noticed before. Its sign read, "Rose and Frame Local Artists Exhibition." Something about the name made his heart skip. Rose, the same flower carved into the bottom of the wooden box. The same roses from the park. He grabbed his coat and hurried outside, crossing the street through the soft rain. The bell over the gallery door jingled as he stepped in. The place smelled faintly of oil paint and varnish. The walls were lined with paintings, cityscapes, portraits, abstract colors, all signed by different artists. "Welcome," said a woman from behind the counter. "Looking for something special?" "I'm not sure," Ethan said honestly. "I just saw the name outside. Rose and Frame. Do you know who started this gallery?" The woman smiled. "It was opened many years ago by a local artist named Agnes Miller. She passed away not long ago. I'm her niece. Are you, by any chance, Ethan?" He froze. "Yes," he said quietly. Her expression softened. "Then you should come with me." She led him to a small room at the back of the gallery. The walls there were covered in framed sketches, gentle pencil drawings of people, streets, and moments frozen in time. In the center of the wall hung one drawing that caught Ethan's breath. It was of him helping Agnes cross the street. "I found this one among her things," the niece said softly. "She finished it just before she passed away. She asked me to hang it here when the time came. Said the man in this drawing would understand what she meant." Ethan stared at it, speechless. The drawing was so detailed. His posture, the umbrella he'd held, the look of gratitude on Agnes's face. It was as if she had captured that moment forever. "She told me that day changed her," the niece continued. "She said it gave her peace after years of carrying pain. She also said you reminded her of someone." "Her son," Ethan said quietly. The woman nodded. "Yes, she talked about him often. Said he was her light. And when she met you, she said it felt like seeing a reflection of him again. The same kindness, the same calm way of helping without expecting anything in return." Ethan felt a lump rise in his throat. "I didn't do anything special," he said softly. The niece smiled gently. "To you, maybe. But to her it meant the world. She used to say that life has a strange way of bringing people together when they need each other most." Ethan's eyes moved across the rest of the wall. There were other drawings. Children playing in the park, an old man feeding birds, a woman selling flowers. All simple everyday scenes. Yet every face was full of emotion, full of quiet stories. The niece handed him a small envelope. "She left this for you too. Said I should give it to you if you ever came here." Ethan took it carefully and opened it. Inside was a short letter written in Agnes's familiar handwriting. "My dear Ethan, if you're reading this, it means you followed the path I left for you. Thank you for that. You see, I spent so many years painting, but I stopped when the world took my son away. I thought the beauty had gone with him. But when you helped me that day, something changed. It was as if the color came back into my world. I went home that night and painted again for the first time in 30 years. You reminded me that kindness is still alive. I wanted to pass that on to you, not money, not things, but a story. The story of how one simple act can heal a broken heart. Everything I've left behind is now yours to share if you wish. Tell people about it. Let them remember that small kindness still matters. With love, Agnes." Ethan held the letter tightly, his heart aching in the best way possible. He looked around the gallery again and suddenly understood what she meant by, "Find the light I left behind." This gallery, these drawings, they were her light. And now somehow it had become part of his life too. The niece watched him quietly. She used to say art and kindness are the same and both leave something beautiful behind. Ethan smiled faintly. She was right. Before he left, he stood in front of the drawing one last time. The image of him and Agnes seemed alive, almost breathing. There was warmth in it, the kind that words couldn't capture. He whispered softly, "Thank you." When he stepped outside, the rain had stopped. The air smelled clean, and the sunlight peeked through the clouds, casting golden reflections on the wet street. He walked slowly, each step feeling lighter. That night, he returned to his apartment and looked at the box again. For the first time, it didn't feel mysterious. It felt complete, like a circle that had closed. He took out the sketch Agnes had made of him and placed it on his wall. Then he opened his notebook and began to write, not just about Agnes, but about everything, about the day they met, the way she smiled, the key, the letters, and the art gallery. He realized that maybe this was what she wanted, not just for him to find the past, but to carry it forward. To tell her story so others might be inspired to stop, notice, and help, even when no one else does. Over the next few weeks, Ethan started collecting stories from people in the neighborhood. He spoke to those who had known Agnes, those who had seen her kindness in small ways, a meal she shared, a painting she gifted, a kind word she offered. He gathered them all and displayed them in a small corner of the bookstore, calling it the Kindness Corner. He placed Agnes's sketch at the center. People began stopping by, leaving their own notes. Thank you letters, apologies, promises to be better. It became something beautiful, a quiet space filled with love and humanity. Sometimes, when Ethan stood there watching strangers read the letters and smile, he felt her presence beside him again, not in a ghostly way, but in the gentle feeling that kindness never truly leaves. It just finds new hearts to live in. And as he locked up the bookstore one evening, he looked across the street at the crosswalk where it had all begun. Cars rushed by, lights flickered, and people hurried, just like before. But this time he didn't see the rush or the noise. He saw possibilities, because he now knew what one small act of kindness could lead to. Days turned into weeks, and weeks slowly turned into months. Yet the memory of that rainy afternoon never faded from Ethan's mind. Every morning, when he opened the bookstore, the soft sketch of him and Agnes hanging on the wall reminded him that life often hides meaning in the most ordinary moments. The kindness corner he had created was no longer just a shelf in the store. It had become something living, a quiet, breathing place filled with stories. Strangers came in, sometimes shy, sometimes emotional, leaving little notes that said things like, "I forgave my brother today. A stranger helped me when my car broke down. I'm paying it forward. Thank you for reminding me that good still exists." People from nearby neighborhoods started visiting just to read the stories. Some brought flowers. Some brought their children. A few even left behind sketches of their own. Ethan watched it grow with quiet amazement. He never advertised it, never spoke much about it. It simply spread, word of mouth, one heart to another. One day, a middle-aged woman walked in carrying a newspaper. She looked at Ethan and smiled. "You're the one who started this, right?" He nodded modestly. She unfolded the paper and placed it on the counter. There, on the second page, was a headline: "The Bookstore of Kindness Inspires an Entire Town." The article spoke about how one man's effort to keep a stranger's memory alive had sparked a movement. It mentioned Agnes by name, how her small act of crossing the street had led to something far greater than anyone could have expected. Ethan read it slowly, feeling both humbled and grateful. "I didn't start it," he said softly. "She did," the woman smiled. "Maybe, but you carried it forward." That night, after closing the store, Ethan sat by the window with a cup of tea. The city outside was quiet. He thought about how different his life had been just a few months ago. Simple, routine, uneventful. He used to pass by people without looking, just like everyone else. But now he couldn't help noticing the small things. A child offering an old man his seat on the bus. A woman feeding stray cats. Two strangers sharing an umbrella in the rain. It was as if Agnes had opened his eyes to the invisible beauty that had always been there. One evening, as the sun dipped below the skyline, a familiar face appeared at the bookstore door. It was Agnes's niece, the woman from the art gallery. She was holding a small package. "I thought you might want this," she said gently. Inside was a framed painting, one of Agnes's last works. It showed a quiet street at sunset, a crosswalk, and two figures walking together, one older, one younger. It was painted in warm golden tones that glowed softly, like light through autumn leaves. She never finished it, the niece said, but I think that's how she wanted it, open, incomplete. Like kindness, it never really ends. Ethan placed the painting near the front of the bookstore. Every time the evening light streamed through the window, the colors shimmered as if alive. Months later, something unexpected happened again. The city council reached out to Ethan. They wanted to organize a community event, the Day of Kindness, inspired by the movement that had started in his little shop. They asked him to speak at the opening ceremony. Ethan hesitated at first. He wasn't someone who liked attention, but when he thought about Agnes, he realized this was exactly what she would have wanted, her message shared beyond the walls of a small bookstore. When the day came, hundreds gathered in the park. There were stalls with art displays, book donations, food drives, and children drawing chalk hearts on the pavements. The air was filled with laughter and music. Ethan stood on the small stage holding a simple note in his trembling hands. He looked out at the crowd, so many faces, so many stories, and took a deep breath. I don't really have a big speech, he began. All I have is a small story. He told them about the day he met Agnes, the old woman who struggled to cross the street, the umbrella he shared, the unexpected gift she left behind. He spoke about the letters, the art gallery, and the way her kindness kept growing even after she was gone. When he finished, the park was silent for a long moment. Then slowly people began clapping, not the loud kind, but the soft, heartfelt kind that feels more like gratitude than applause. After the event, children ran around giving out small paper hearts that said, "Do one kind thing today." Ethan smiled as he watched them. For the first time, he felt completely at peace. The next morning, he found a new letter slipped under the bookstore door. It was written by someone he didn't know. "Dear Ethan, I came to your bookstore last week. I was having one of the hardest days of my life. I sat in your kindness corner, read a few letters, and cried quietly. But I left feeling lighter. Yesterday, I helped an old man carry his groceries home. I don't know why I'm telling you this. Maybe because you should know that what you started is still growing. Thank you." Ethan folded the letter and placed it gently in the growing collection on the wall. He didn't know who wrote it, and he didn't need to. It was proof that kindness doesn't need to be seen to be real. As time passed, he began to paint again, not with grand skill like Agnes, but with quiet sincerity. He painted the park, the bookstore, the faces of people who visited. He even painted the crosswalk where it all began, capturing the faint reflection of that rainy day. One evening, as he stood outside locking the store, a young boy walked up to him. "Are you the man who helped that lady cross the street?" the boy asked. Ethan smiled gently. "I suppose I am. My grandma told me that story," the boy said proudly. "She said you reminded her that good people still exist." Ethan looked down at him with warmth in his eyes. "Your grandma sounds very wise," the boy grinned. "She said kindness is like a circle. If you give it away, it always comes back." Ethan nodded slowly. "She's absolutely right." The boy waved and ran off, his laughter echoing down the quiet street. Ethan stood there for a while, looking at the same crosswalk glowing under the streetlight. Cars passed, people hurried, and the world went on. But he felt something eternal in that moment. He looked up at the sky and whispered softly, "You were right, Agnes, it really does come back." That night, when he went home, he opened the box one last time. The letters, the sketches, the small trinkets, everything inside carried a heartbeat of memory. He didn't feel sadness anymore, only gratitude. He took one of the blank pages from the box and wrote a single line in neat handwriting. "Kindness never ends. It only finds new hands." Then he placed it back inside and closed the lid gently, smiling to himself. Years later, people would still talk about the little bookstore that started it all. They'd say it wasn't the books or the drawings that made it special. It was the feeling inside. A feeling that came from one rainy afternoon, one small act, and one simple choice to care. And somewhere in the quiet corner of that bookstore, the painting of the crosswalk still hangs. Two figures walking side by side under a single umbrella, reminding everyone who sees it that the smallest things can leave the biggest mark. Because sometimes, the world doesn't change in grand ways. Sometimes it changes when one person simply decides to help someone cross the street. Years passed, but Ethan never forgot that rainy evening when he first met Agnes. The city changed around him. New buildings rose, old ones disappeared, and faces in the crowd constantly shifted. Yet some things remained the same. The quiet moments that carry meaning. The small gestures that ripple outward in ways we can never fully see. The bookstore had grown beyond what Ethan had imagined. It was no longer just a place to buy books. It had become a sanctuary of stories, memories, and quiet inspiration. Children from nearby schools came for reading sessions, elderly people came to share their own tales, and visitors from across the city came to see the Kindness Corner. People often left letters, drawings, and small trinkets, all symbols of the simple yet profound truth that Agnes had taught Ethan, that even a tiny act of care can change a life. Ethan had grown too. The shy, quiet man who once only noticed the small details of the world now saw connections everywhere. He noticed the way a shopkeeper helped a customer patiently, the way a stranger held the door for someone running late, the way someone smiled at another person in the park. He realized that Agnes had opened his eyes to a truth he hadn't understood before. Kindness isn't just an act, it's a perspective. It's a lens through which the world transforms. One spring afternoon, a letter arrived in the mail. It wasn't typed or printed. It was handwritten with careful, deliberate strokes. Ethan recognized the handwriting immediately, though not exactly. It was the niece of Agnes. "Dear Ethan, I hope this finds you well. I wanted to let you know something I discovered recently while going through more of Aunt Agnes's things. There's a journal she kept when she was very young. She wrote about you, even before you were born. She always believed you would find her one day, that you would be the person to carry her kindness forward. I know it sounds strange, but reading it made me understand why she trusted you so much. She wrote about moments in her life where she wished someone had acted with patience or care, and she imagined a young man who would notice, who would choose to help even when it seemed small. She never forgot those moments, and now neither do you. I'm sending the journal to you. It's time for you to see the rest of her story." Ethan felt his hands shake as he opened the package. Inside was a leather-bound journal, its edges worn and soft with age. He ran his fingers over the cover and felt a strange warmth. Sitting by the window, he opened it carefully. The pages were filled with memories he had never known. Agnes's childhood, her struggles, her dreams, the joy she felt in little things. There were stories of her first painting, the time she fed a stray cat in winter, and the day she realized that helping people wasn't just about grand gestures but about noticing when someone needed a hand, a lesson she had carried her whole life. Ethan read for hours, occasionally pausing to absorb the words, to imagine the life she had lived, and to feel the connection she had left behind. In the last pages, there were letters she had written but never sent, addressed to no one in particular. One of them made him gasp. "If someday a young man crosses my path, someone with kind eyes, patient hands, and a gentle heart, I will know that he is the one who understands the lessons I have learned. He will carry my light forward, and he will make the world brighter in ways I never could. Even if we never meet again, I will leave him this gift, a story that proves kindness can travel through time and touch hearts we may never see." Ethan closed the journal slowly. He realized that everything, the key, the letters, the drawings, the gallery, the kindness corner, had been part of a plan he hadn't understood. Agnes had trusted him, not just for a moment of help, but for a lifetime of carrying her vision forward. He felt a surge of emotion, awe, gratitude, and humility all at once. The world felt bigger now, filled with invisible threads connecting people, moments, and acts of kindness in ways that couldn't always be explained. Over the next months, Ethan began a new project. Inspired by Agnes's words, he created a program in the bookstore to collect stories of ordinary acts of kindness. Visitors were encouraged to share not just what they had done, but also what they had received. Every story was added to a growing archive, a living testament to the ripple effect of good deeds. People began noticing the changes. The neighborhood became warmer, friendlier. Strangers smiled more, children helped one another, and elderly people felt safer knowing the community was attentive. Small acts of help, patience, and care multiplied. Ethan realized with quiet awe that this was the gift Agnes had left him. The knowledge that one kind gesture could grow into a movement, changing more lives than he could count. One evening, while walking home from the bookstore, he stopped by the same crosswalk where it had all begun. Cars rushed past, lights flickered, people hurried, and just like before. But now he noticed something else. Children holding umbrellas for each other. A young couple helping an elderly man carry his groceries. A woman returning a lost wallet to its owner. The street, the ordinary city, the noise. It was all alive with little sparks of goodness. He smiled and whispered softly, "It really does come back." Years later, long after the gallery had become a city landmark, after the Kindness Corner had inspired a community project, Ethan sat in the bookstore reading a new letter from a visitor. "Dear Ethan, I came here last week feeling hopeless. I saw the Kindness Corner and read your story. That night, I held the door open for a neighbor, helped a stranger on the bus, and even comforted a child who was lost. I wanted to let you know that your story changed me, and now I am passing it on. Thank you." Ethan put the letter down, closing his eyes for a moment. He realized that Agnes had been right. Kindness does not end. It moves quietly from hand to hand, heart to heart, across years and miles, leaving unseen footprints that carry warmth, courage, and hope. The small key she had left him so many years ago had opened more than a box. It had opened a world. It had taught him the value of noticing, caring, and acting. It had taught him that even a single moment, a single choice, could echo across time in ways we cannot predict. And sometimes, he thought, that is all life really asks of us, to see, to act, and to trust that even the smallest gesture can change someone's life forever. Ethan looked around the bookstore, at the letters on the wall, the sketches, and the Kindness Corner, and he felt a profound sense of peace. He understood that the story was no longer just Agnes's nor just his. It belonged to everyone who read it, who acted on it, and who chose to notice the small ways they could make a difference. He whispered her name into the quiet room. "Thank you, Agnes, for trusting me, for showing me, for letting me carry your light forward." Outside, the city continued its rhythm. People hurried, buses honked, and the world moved on. But for Ethan, for the lives he touched, and for the countless stories inspired by a single act of kindness, the world had changed. Quietly, softly, irrevocably, and in that subtle shift, he finally understood the truth Agnes had known all along, that life's most profound treasures are not wealth, fame, or power, but simple human acts that leave a lasting mark on the hearts of others. Because sometimes, all it takes to change the world is to help someone cross the street,